The Volvo V40 and the V40 Cross Country began production in 2012 for 2013 model years and not only marked one of the last Ford-era developed car releases, but was the first production car fitted with a pedestrian airbag to set a new record at Euro NCAP safety testing. Due to its release date, this is the last car that would be fitted with the engines that Volvo enthusiasts had grown to love. The dependable inline-5 petrol and diesel and the PSA Group diesels are the launch engines for the V40, but with the sale to Geely back in 2010, changing the future of the brand's direction away from Ford and European partnerships, the facelift mothballs the shared engines in favour of a new in-house engine-coded VEA in both petrol and diesel format. However, I will note that this can happen as early as 2014 in some markets. Specifications on the V40 and cross-country models does vary, the T2 and up to T5 and D2 up to D4 giving a power designation, but in the V40 there is a wide choice of trim from ES and SE, each with sub-trims within them. Then there is Momentum and Inscription, and then Sport and R-Design for those wanting a more dynamic setup. The R-Design alone has 7 sub-trims to either add navigation or additional packages. The Cross Country limits specification with SE, Lux, Nav, and then Pro, with some regions differences between trim. Used buyers that want a facelift car will be looking for a 2016 model year that are notable by the front end change, adopting the Thor's hammer design that was introduced on the XC90. Sales of the cross-country model were slower in some European countries, while very strong in others. Saying that though, Australians preferred the cross-country for its added durability, especially if drivers regularly used unsealed roads or country tracks, while the USA and Canada were not sold the V40 model, with Volvo North America saying there was low demand for a 5-door hatchback cars in the US. The cross-country model added 40mm of ride height with chunkier bumpers and skid plates. Wheels could be optioned up to 19 inches with larger tyres than the regular V40 with 19-inch R-Design wheels or Polestar options. If looking in the early model years then the T5 or T4 power specification, then an all-wheel drive drivetrain with hill descent could be optioned. Volvo marketed the car as the V40 with attitude. A side note for used buyers, there are technically 6 different gearboxes, although 2 are ASIN 6-speed autos. Another is the ASIN 8-speed. There were manuals in some markets, these are both 6 speeds. One is a Volvo M66 unit, while the other is a GetRag B6. Aside from this, you may see models with a power shift gearbox. This is a Ford-derived 6-speed dual-clutch built with GetRag. From a reliability standpoint, ASIN transmissions are well known for dependability. The company is part of the Toyota Group and is common across manufacturers. As mentioned earlier, the V40 scored a new record at Euro NCAP when it was tested. A full 5 stars is not unusual for Volvo, but a 98% score in adult occupancy and a 100% score in safety assists. This score has now expired due to a new testing regime though. Moving on to common faults, and a reminder to subscribe if you enjoy the video, as there are over 200 guides on the channel and more on the way. It's also worth remembering that a common fault does not guarantee the issue, so these are worth checking, but not destined to happen. When getting in a car, there is a double check. The first is for the air conditioning performance drop, usually caused by the evaporator leaking, and then check the infotainment functions throughout the media, but also that the Bluetooth connection holds on a test drive as they can drop out. Both of these can be a cheap fix, but also have the possibility of being a very expensive repair, especially if the dashboard needs to come out. Front suspension knocks on test drive will be a sign of worn drop links or front arms. Occasionally the strut tops are also to blame. This may have already worn the tyres unevenly, adding additional cost to a repair, and so check and be ready to negotiate if this is the case, as while it may seem like a quick fix, owners that have experienced this issue say it can spiral into an expensive repair. The V40 is similar to most Volvos in wearing the front suspension a little faster than other cars, but low quality parts will wear quickly, so check a receipt if an owner says they have recently changed the suspension to make sure they are quality parts. If you're looking at the manual gearboxes, the Volvo M66 unit can wear the clutch a bit quicker than average. You'll notice that the bite point feels vague and is higher than you expect if it's on its way out. An exterior check aside from the regular dents and scratches would be an inspection to look at the front headlights for any sign of fogging or condensation. This affects the pre-facelift cars, and there is a Volvo approved fix which includes adding a vent, which is essentially a breathable membrane. While checking the exterior condition, try all the door handles after the car is locked. 2012 and 2013 built cars can either fail to lock all the doors every time or have an actuator fail entirely, meaning a door stops responding to the key. The problem appears fixed by 2017 and was not as common after 2014. As the Volvo V40 was a strong scorer with safety technology, it won't be a surprise that this was a complaint from owners that found it overly sensitive in some cases. Going into the My Car section allows you to dull the sensitivity of the sensors if you find it too intrusive. If this still doesn't solve the issue, then make sure the windscreen is original. If it has been changed, the safety sensors should have been recalibrated at the same time. If not, they can be too aggressive. As these cars have aged, some owners have chosen to fit a cheaper battery. It was originally supplied by Volvo, especially if a used car garage has needed to change it to sell a car and not known that the car has an AGM or an EFB battery that requires the module to be reset. Having the incorrect battery will generally lead to a loss of start-stop functions and countless warnings of problems. Knowing to check the battery is the correct spec, as the first place to check can save you hours and a lot of diagnostic labour time. If it isn't the battery, then a recalibration of the BMS resolves many issues, especially if getting warnings of power save mode. A few final checks are for water ingress in the footwells, usually common from scuttle drains or sunroof drains, and a simple case of declogging the drain, although you'll want to check the water hasn't reached any electrical wiring, and then a quick brake test both at low speed parking and a few higher speed runs. If you hear any squeaking, then you're not alone. Some found this caused by the rear calipers sticking and needing replacing, others found that the front pads and discs had worn unevenly. This affected the V40 across model years and models. Next up, the recalls, and a reminder to add a like to the video if you're finding it useful, so others will be recommended it to watch. In 2017, there was a single recall for the airbag igniter, causing inadequate inflation on 2015 and 2016 models. In 2018, a fuel hose was identified as a possible to suffer cracking on 2014 to 2016 cars. Owners were sent a letter or called to have a vehicle checked and the parts replaced if affected. In 2019, there were 3 recalls. One is the same fuel hose but for a wider group of cars across several markets. Another is due to the plastic intake on 2-litre diesel cars that could melt on 2014 to 2019 built cars, and with the newer engines, and then a similar recall but for 2015 to 2019 cars in markets like Australia that didn't receive the later engine designs immediately like Europe due to shipping timelines. In 2020, there were 2 recalls, one for trapped air in the cooling system across model years, and the other was a similar recall but only for 2014 to 2018 cars. Next up, the engines, and as mentioned, the first couple of years have the older engines, but from 2014 or 2015, the newer Volvo built engines take over. Starting with the petrols, there is a Ford EcoBoost 1.6-litre engine coded B416 and is fitted to the T2 and T3 and T4 up to 2015, making 120 and 149 brake horsepower and then 179 brake horsepower with an average of 51.4 miles per gallon or 5.5 litres per 100 kilometres. These have gained a reputation for carbon build-up that needs to be cleaned off as the cars get to high mileage, and cooling issues, which is by far the biggest concern for most owners in hot climates. Some also report boost control issues, but this is rarer. However, most owners have been happy, but the engine was still a less popular than the diesel models, which seems in line with Volvo's expectations, with the car sold in markets that at the time had strong demand for diesel powertrains. Then there is the B52 engine, which is one of the old 5-cylinder engines many have grown to love. This was sold as both a 2-litre and a 2.5 and coded VME in both. If buying a T4 model, it will be the 2-litre with 179 brake horsepower and 37.7 miles per gallon or 7.5 litres per 100 kilometres fuel economy. The 2.5 litre though has 249 to 252 brake horsepower and averages 35.8 miles per gallon or 7.9 litres per 100 kilometres on the older and less accurate NEDC test cycle. Common complaints include the PCV diaphragm failures, which had several revisions. Generally, the part ending with a D is the one that has been most reliable. The auxiliary belt can become frail faster than you may expect, and some minor oil issues have been reported, but overall people like this engine and generally run them for high mileage, although poorly serviced engines can suffer big failures, including the loss of compression in one or more cylinders by misshaping pistons or failed rings, causing an expensive repair. Then there are the newer Volvo engines, starting with the 1.5 litre B415 sold in either T2 or T3 with 120 brake horsepower or 150 brake horsepower, with an official fuel economy of 50.4 miles per gallon or 5.6 litres per 100 kilometres. Again, there were complaints of direct injection carbon buildup, along with a start-stop issue becoming an annoying issue for some owners. However, overall the engine was less popular, so while I will say that the engine has been dependable for most, it is a smaller sample size. After this, there is the newer 2-litre engine coded B42, which is in the T4 and the T5, with a T2 variant added in some markets. No surprise in the T2 being the lower power at 120 brake horsepower, but the T4 gets 189 brake horsepower, and the T5 gets 247 brake horsepower. Fuel economy is averaged at 47.9 miles per gallon, or 5.9 litres per 100 kilometres in official testing, although owners report this is only really achievable in long-distance drives and is worse in city driving. There were complaints of oil consumption, although this was addressed with a technical journal for inspection and correction at Volvo dealers if spotted during servicing. The high-pressure fuel pump has been an expensive repair for some owners though. Although it is reported only just as common enough to make it onto the list, there was a complaint of crankshaft front seals failing on some early versions of the engine, meaning if buying a 2015 or a 2016, it's worth having a good look around the engine bay for any signs of a previous or current oil leak. If you spot one, or if you spot this in the service records, then you'll know it's been sorted. Then there are the diesels, which does include a long-standing 5-cylinder, but in the 2-litre form. Starting though with the D416, which is a 1.6 litre from PSA and fitted to the first 2 years of production. Power is rated at 113 brake horsepower, with an official average fuel economy of 78.5 miles per gallon, or 3.6 litres per 100 kilometres. And while owners have reported issues with the EGR and DPF requiring replacement or premature wear, they have been good ownership experiences, with the oil feed strainer from the turbo blocking being a concern on poorly kept cars. So if buying a car with little or no history, this is well worth getting inspected, as catching it before it becomes a major problem may just save a lot of money further down the line. Then there is the 5-cylinder. The D52 2-litre is badged D3 or D4 and has either 149 or 176 brake horsepower, with an average fuel economy of 65.7 miles per gallon or 4.3 litres per 100 kilometres. Although I'll note the automatic gearbox models record a figure around 10 to 15% worse. Although these older design engines are known for their dependability, they suffer many of the same emissions-related issues as any modern engine, and with the DPF and EGR, they can have a costly repair, but many owners accept one of these repairs, as aside from this, they usually just require servicing on time to stay running well past 150,000 miles, with some Swedes getting 500,000 kilometres out of the D52 engines in fairly harsh weather. The D52 is dropped from most markets in 2015, as new emissions regulations ushered in a new era of engines. The VEA engine platform gives us the 2-litre engine coded D42 in 3 power levels. The D2, D3 and D4 make 120, 150 and then 189 brake horsepower, with some initially very high fuel economy claims as the NED test cycles were still in force, but on the newer WLTP standard, 70.6 miles per gallon or 4 litres per 100 kilometres is submitted. Again, emissions equipment lead the list of complaints, although some throttle-related software and hardware issues make it worth checking the engine runs smoothly on test drive. Pressure sensors and the EGR and cooler fouling each other are common on early engines, but overall, as modern diesels go, the engine is standing up well, although I have to caveat that as it is the only one sold for a second half of production and improvements from 2017 make the engine perform better, the data is fairly limited. However, I have covered this engine in other Volvos and again found it to be well regarded overall. No, it isn't the old 5-cylinder, but its fuel economy and good power delivery make it a popular pick among owners. Moving on to our picks, and it was a tough one. On a low budget pick, the great fuel economy of the D2, even with the earlier engine, would make it a good choice if you find one with a good service record, but a top pick would be the fun choice. An early T5 with a 5-cylinder engine, preferably with some Polestar performance kit added. If this isn't for you though, then a later cross country with either a D4 or D5 engine fitted would be a long-lasting choice for those that want something that will carry on forever. If the V40 isn't for you, we have plenty of other Volvo guides along with other manufacturers, so why not check out the Volvo V60 or even the XC40 next.